Welcome to this video on stakeholders in photovoltaic development. By the end of this video, you should be able to list the different jobs that are available in the photovoltaic industry and the relative needs of each of those fields. You should also be able to identify the allied trades and professions associated with photovoltaics and describe the background required for each of those fields. And you should be able to explain and evaluate the interactions that occur between the stakeholders. To begin, let's look at an overview of the photovoltaic industry. It encompasses many skill areas ranging from academic research through the vocational trades. The industry begins with research in the academic institutions and companies who develop the new technologies and materials that are used in the photovoltaic industry. Those technologies work in tandem with standards organizations that include safety and oversight of the materials that are being produced within the industry. The products made by module manufacturers and component manufacturers are used and combined by system integrators. Those system integrators work with system installers, and the installer works directly with the consumer. Overseeing these different pieces of photovoltaic technologies are trade associations, training organizations, and code authorities. Let's begin by looking at the role of research at the academic and industrial companies. Researchers working in photovoltaic technologies include academic, governmental, and commercial organizations. They develop new cutting-edge materials and technologies through research and development. However, this means that many of the materials that the research produces are not going to be available commercially in the field for several years or even decades. The research institutions also help set some of the standards for measurement and evaluation, such as the Universal Standard for full sunlight or other electrical specifications. Next, there are the standards organizations. There are several organizations that are involved in the global definitions of universal design for photovoltaics, control, and safety of photovoltaic equipment. Some of these organizations extend beyond just photovoltaics, and you may have heard of some of them. Groups like UL, or Underwriters Laboratory, certify equipment safety. The IEEE, which is the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers, which oversees electrical standards. The National Electric Code, which in the US ensures the electrical code in the United States is consistent and safe. In the United States, there's also OSHA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which oversees safety of employees and workers in the field. Then there are manufacturers. Module manufacturers are the companies that produce the solar panels and oversee cell and module development. Component manufacturers are the companies that produce other PV parts, like the inverters, the battery, charge controllers, the mounting and racking components, and other associated hardware. Manufacturers often work with the research organizations to make sure that there are enough materials that are available to meet the demand, as well as develop new technologies to improve efficiency. Other than PV modules themselves, most components are also used outside the photovoltaic industry. Some materials like the racking for solar panels are also used for solar thermal installations, and charge controllers can also be used for, say, wind installations. Expertise in this area would include mechanical engineering through skilled and technical labor. Next, there are the integrators. Integrators design and build photovoltaic systems for a customer or for an installer. The installer may work for the integrator or be contracted by an integrator. Typically, the integrators are people with backgrounds in engineering and contracting, as well as financing and architecture. It includes everything from bidding, pricing, architectural background, design, and engineering. The closest connection to the actual photovoltaic system is the installer themselves. The installer is the on-the-ground direct contact with photovoltaic installations. They have to maintain building and electrical compliance, work with integrators and consumers alike, as well as install and commission systems. Installers often come from a variety of different backgrounds, including electricians, roofers, laborers, and general contractors. Overseeing these areas are code authorities. As I mentioned before, the code authorities interpret and enforce the adopted standards, such as the National Electric Code and the International Building Code. The code authorities typically include building inspectors and electrical inspectors who have expertise in these respective fields, and they work on making sure that each of these codes are followed and that a system is in compliance. They work with the installers, the utilities, and the standards organizations. Now, there are also trade organizations, which are slightly different as they're more business-based. These are groups of photovoltaic manufacturers, installers, and integrators that advocate on behalf of the photovoltaic industry as a whole to promote the field, and they try to build the PV market share for energy. They host trade shows for education, as well as provide some form of industry contact. Some common trade associations associated with photovoltaics are the Solar Energy Industries Association, as well as the American Solar Energy Society and the Solar Power Europe Group. These trade organizations work with manufacturers and integrators to make sure they're advocating and lobbying to support the photovoltaic industry as a whole. There's also trainers. Trainers are charged with preparing installers in all aspects of photovoltaics. Trainers can be found in academic settings such as 4-year and 2-year colleges where there might be courses or degree programs including photovoltaics. For example, here at the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, we've been providing on-campus photovoltaic training for over 10 years. There's also courses, online courses, such as the Coursera specialization that you're watching right now. There's also trainers associated with unions or manufacturers that provide professional development as well as informational content associated with the materials that are produced by that manufacturer. Then there are also certification groups, such as NABCEP, the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, and Underwriters Laboratory. The goal of these groups is to create a unified skill set and expertise for photovoltaic installation. These trainers interact primarily with future installers, so they're the way that potential installers, such as yourself, who are going to become solar installers, get trained. There's also another entity that's involved in any on-grid installation, which is the utility company. Utilities fill an interesting role because they're both a competitive as well as a cooperative partner in photovoltaics. Independently owned photovoltaics often compete with utility-provided energy sources, which are traditional fossil-based energy. U.S. utilities are state-regulated and may be required to integrate photovoltaics into their systems as well as other renewables. So this cuts into the supply and the profits from the utilities and the energy providers. At the same time, it's also important that the utilities develop and upgrade their electrical grid so it can integrate photovoltaics safely into the energy mix. So they have a role in integrating photovoltaics into what they already administer. But utility companies are also starting to become owners of photovoltaic farms and distributing energy from both sources together. So if we look at employment in the field of photovoltaics, nearly all skills and professions are either directly related to or easily adapted to the photovoltaic field. For example, direct transitions into photovoltaics could be from skilled labor for installation and professional trades, such as electricians, general contractors, and construction. The field also involves designing and engineering, financing and accounting, technical sales, as well as manufacturing. So all these fields have direct connections to photovoltaics. Some secondary areas where you might not initially think photovoltaics would play a role would be software and hardware development. For example, oftentimes there's inverters that are network connected, and there's need to be able to program and diagnose these systems. Legal areas involve environmental as well as photovoltaic policies. Analysts are often needed to research new installation sites and new projects. Sales and distribution is also required, and they help develop projects. So what are the most difficult positions to fill in the photovoltaics area? Well, according to the National Solar Job Census in 2016, sales and marketing is actually the hardest area to fill in the PV industry. After that, managers and project directors, followed by engineers and then installers. So there's definitely a need for employment in the photovoltaic area. What kind of experience and education will you need? Well, educational experience varies based upon the field that you're trying to go into. However, in most cases, the photovoltaic add-on often results in a salary increase. Most people in the field have a bachelor's degree, associate's degree, or professional vocational certification. Employment in manufacturing is going to be found for those who have bachelor's degrees. What's important here is that almost everyone comes with some sort of experience when they get hired into the photovoltaic field. So it's important that when one is looking for a photovoltaic job, that there's some familiarity and experience with the photovoltaic as well as the field itself. Now that we've discussed the stakeholders in the photovoltaic industry, you should be able to identify the different types of jobs that are available in photovoltaics, such as installers and architects, the engineers, and the manufacturers. You should be able to identify the allied trades and professions that are associated with photovoltaics, such as electricians, contractors, and those with business accounting skills. You should also be able to describe the training that's required for each of these fields and the background that's needed, as well as explain and evaluate the interactions that occur among these stakeholders. In the next section, we'll discuss how the pricing of photovoltaics comes together with regulations with a focus in the United States.